What's worse than a boss that doesn't know when to quit? How about a boss that doesn't know when to quit and then changes forms, gaining new attacks in the process? It could be one phase after another or throughout different parts of the game, but these 15 transforming bosses made life rough. Dracula, Castlevania 3. Shapeshifting has always been Dracula's thing, at least in the Castlevania games, and Castlevania 3 is no exception. Starting out in typical teleporting fire column summoning fashion, Dracula eventually transforms into a multi-headed thing that floats around spewing gunk. The final phase is a doozy as he transforms into a large winged beast that fires lasers. Certain sections of the floor disappear and act as floating platforms, which you must hop on to hit Dracula in the head and win. Puppet Ganon, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Puppet Ganon isn't terribly difficult, but it takes a while to get through the entire fight. The first phase consists of throwing your boomerang to cut off the puppet's strings. Once it falls, shoot it in the tail with a light arrow. There's just a lot of string cutting involved in this part. Eventually, the puppet transforms into a spider which tries to crush you. Once it's taken enough damage, it transforms into a caterpillar who must be shot in the tail while you move around and avoid being trampled. Again, not the toughest fight, but a lengthy stop en route to the last battle. Mother Brain, Super Metroid. You just can't keep a good Mother Brain down. The entity returns in Super Metroid, first challenging Samus to a platforming run while firing lots of projectiles. Reaching Mother Brain and firing a bunch of missiles into her isn't the end of it. She then rises up as a towering beast with a beam attack. After the Metroid hatchling comes to Samus's aid, you have to finish off the Mother Brain, now in a more manic state, with the Hyper Beam. Easy peasy. Cue traditional self-destruct escape sequence for good measure. Nyarlathotep, Sundered. Lasers. That's the best way to summarize this boss fight. If you choose to fully resist the dark forces in Sundered, you'll battle the ancient Nyarlathotep. It has 3 main points to attack, which you must constantly grapple onto, and it can swat you easily with its huge arm. As its health drops, it'll summon eldritch horrors to fire at you along with the aforementioned lasers. And just when you think it's over, the shining trapezohedron will take over and unleash even more projectiles and fodder. Father Gascoigne, Bloodborne. A nightmare for many a new Bloodborne player, Gascoigne starts off in a mostly human form, firing shots and striking with his axe. Deplete enough health and he begins two-handing the axe. Still not a big deal, especially when you time the staggers and visceral attacks properly. It's in his third phase when he turns into a gosh darn beast, mercilessly jumping and striking with little relent. Sephiroth, Final Fantasy VII. The final confrontation with Sephiroth is, to put it bluntly, nuts. You start out with Bizarro Sephiroth and have to choose 3 different parties to damage his subcores before targeting the main core. Funnily enough, the fight becomes much easier if you somehow arrange a one-party situation, but it's not over there. Next, Sephiroth turns into Safer Sephiroth, who gains increased health and stats depending on how many characters are at level 99, and also has unlimited MP. Once all of that is out of the way, Cloud battles Sephiroth one-on-one in the live stream to finally end it all. Final boss, IKARUGA. You'd think that a few forms would be manageable for a shmup boss, but this is IKARUGA. The final boss starts by shooting hundreds of projectiles before shifting gears and sending energy snakes that follow you around. Its third form fires tracking shots, requiring you to shift polarities and return fire at the right time, while avoiding tons of other bullets. The Devil, Cuphead. Though only possessing 2 phases in Cuphead, the Devil's various transformations during attack sure are something. You have the standard form just grinning down at you, the goat man that tries to crush you with his hands, detaching his head and turning it into a spider, and so on. All of this is before the Devil leaves his skin for a huge screen-covering fight. Nega Filgaia, Wild Arms 3. Leaving aside the battle with Beatrice, the final boss in Wild Arms 3 requires beating a total of 10 different forms. That's almost 30 minutes of straight fighting, mechanics, and bizarre forms ranging from blobby masses to dragons. Have fun! Iudex Gundyr, Dark Souls 3. As the first real boss test that players face in Dark Souls 3, Iudex Gundyr is pretty well-rounded. However, even before the fight begins, you'll notice that something isn't quite right with him. This manifests in the form of a dark serpent mass that gives Gundyr new moves and longer reach, not to mention increased damage. A pain for sure, until you face Champion Gundyr, that is. Sigma, Mega Man X4. Sigma just never learns, but his over-the-top final boss shenanigans are craziest in Mega Man X4. First, you start by fighting a Grim Reaper-esque floating version. He eventually casts away the cloak for lasers and a boomerang staff. The next phase is interesting, as Sigma dons a different body and manifests several large robot heads to trap and ensnare you. Once that's done, you fight his large head stuck to the floor, avoiding projectiles and spikes along with the giant robot heads. Onslaught, Marvel vs. Capcom. Onslaught marked the first of several insane multi-phase bosses that would define Capcom's crossover fighters for years. The first phase was straightforward enough with the projectiles, screen-covering beams, and unstoppable charge. The next phase is when the big man decides to go even bigger, dealing absurd amounts of screen-covering damage. While not the toughest Capcom fighting boss till date, defeating Onslaught back in the day was an achievement in itself. Nemesis, Resident Evil 3. The armor-wearing, rocket-launcher-touting version of Nemesis is constantly out to get you, but that's only one part of his horrifying potential. As the game progresses, he'll lose his limiter and grow out those tentacles more, grabbing our heroes and slicing them up accordingly. His third form is little more than a huge mutated mass that spits acid and can't be damaged by regular weaponry. Master Core, Super Smash Bros. Wii U. In terms of final bosses in the Smash Bros. Series, Master Core in Super Smash Bros. Wii U is hard to top. If you play on the highest difficulty, you'll go from fighting Master Hand and Crazy Hand to a dark humanoid mass with projectiles for days. Deal enough damage and it turns into a tailed beast that calls down lightning. Next, a squad of swords, and then a shadow version of the character you're playing. And if you somehow beat all of that, you then face the Master Fortress, a maze with a core that must be damaged multiple times. And then finally, you face the core on its defenseless lonesome and defeat it for the win. Reflux, Rayman 3. Reflux can be pretty fun to fight despite the varied number of gameplay styles involved. Starting off in his regular form, summoning lightning, eventually he transitions into a giant monstrosity which Rayman has to climb on to damage. After this, Reflux spawns wings and flies around, requiring you to hop on a gun turret in the skies, shooting any projectiles that get too close while firing at his back. This is interrupted by moments of just flying around near his feet, avoiding projectiles before getting back into the sky. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, please hit the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to switch on the notifications bell icon next to it. That way you'll never miss any of our videos. Thanks for watching.